My wife left me for a younger, richer man. Divorce revealed I'm worth 50x more than her boyfriend. When my wife Brenda said, I'm leaving you for someone who can actually provide for me, I simply nodded and said, I understand. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce papers. By the next morning, I had quietly moved $2.3 million into a separate account. And that was just the beginning. For 15 years, I thought we had the perfect marriage. I'm Kevin Mitchell, 52 years old, and I work what most people think is a boring job. I'm a senior compliance officer for a major investment firm. Brenda always called it pushing papers. What she didn't know was that those papers had made me incredibly wealthy through stock options, bonuses, and smart investments I never bothered to mention. The moment I heard her on the phone with her sister saying, Kevin's such a loser. Brad makes more in 6 months than Kevin makes in 2 years. I realized my wife of 15 years had never really known who she married. They thought they were dealing with some middle-aged paper pusher who'd beg her to stay. They were about to learn that I'm one of the best financial investigators in the country, and I don't lose. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I met Brenda when I was 37 and she was 29. She was working as a receptionist at a dental office, struggling to make ends meet. I was already doing well financially, but I lived modestly. I drove a reliable Honda, lived in a nice but not fancy house, and wore simple clothes. Brenda seemed to love that I was stable and dependable. You're not flashy like the other guys I dated, she'd say. You're real. Over the years, I supported her through everything. When she wanted to go back to school, I paid for her business degree. When her mother got sick, I covered all the medical bills that insurance wouldn't. When her brother needed bail money after his DUI, I wrote the check without question. I never made a big deal about money. My parents raised me to be humble about wealth. Money doesn't make you better than anyone, my father always said. So I kept living simply, even as my investment portfolio grew into the millions. Brenda started changing about 3 years ago. She began complaining that we never went on expensive vacations like her friends. She wanted a bigger house, designer clothes, a luxury car. Everyone in my book club drives a BMW or Mercedes, she'd say. I'm embarrassed to show up in that old Honda. I offered to get her a nicer car, but somehow it was never enough. She wanted more, always more. She started talking about how her friends' husbands were real providers and how she felt limited by our lifestyle. What really hurt was when she started treating me like I was beneath her. She'd roll her eyes when I talked about my work. She'd make comments about how I was satisfied with mediocrity, while her friends' husbands were ambitious. Last year, she met Brad Hawkins at her book club. He was 38, recently divorced, and drove a flashy red Corvette. He worked in pharmaceutical sales and wasn't shy about talking about his 6-figure income. Brenda started mentioning Brad constantly. Brad just bought a boat. Brad's taking a trip to Hawaii. Brad says a man should always pay for everything on dates. That last comment was particularly rich, considering I'd been paying for everything in our marriage for 15 years. I started noticing the signs 6 months ago. She'd take long phone calls in the other room. She started working out every day and buying expensive new clothes. She became distant and critical of everything I did. The night everything changed, I came home early from work. Brenda was on the phone in the kitchen, and she didn't hear me come in. Trust me, Kim, I'm done with Kevin, she was saying to her sister. Brad makes more in 6 months than Kevin makes in 2 years. Brad drives a Corvette, Kevin drives a Honda. Brad takes me to fancy restaurants. Kevin thinks Olive Garden is fine dining. I stood frozen in the hallway. I deserve better than this boring life, she continued. Brad says he'll take care of everything once we're together. Kevin will probably try to take half of everything, but what's half of nothing, you know? That phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. Half of nothing. Brad's already looking at condos for us, she went on. Somewhere with a view, not this suburban dump. Kevin's such a loser. I don't know what I was thinking marrying someone so mediocre. I quietly walked back outside and sat in my car for 20 minutes, processing what I'd just heard. My wife of 15 years thought I was worth nothing. She had no idea that our suburban dump was paid off, or that I had an investment account worth more than most people make in a lifetime. When I finally went inside, Brenda was acting perfectly normal, asking about my day with a fake smile. That's when I knew our marriage was over. But she had no idea what was coming next. 2 days later, Brenda left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. It buzzed with a text message, and I saw Brad's name on the screen. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I looked at her phone. The messages between them went back for months. They weren't just planning to be together. They were planning to take me for everything they could in the divorce. Brad had written, "Don't worry, baby. My cousin Rick is a divorce lawyer. He says we can probably get you alimony since you supported Kevin's boring lifestyle for so long. You deserve half of everything plus monthly payments." Brenda had responded, "Kevin's so clueless about money. He'll probably just agree to whatever we ask for. He has no fight in him." Brad, even better. Rick says guys like Kevin usually cave fast. They're too weak to put up a real fight. You'll be set for life. Brenda, I can't wait to be done with this life. Kevin thinks he's such a good provider, but you make more than him without even trying. I'll finally have the life I deserve. There were dozens of messages like this, going back months. They'd been planning this whole thing, talking about how they'd spend my money once the divorce was final. The worst part was a message from just the day before. Kevin looked so pathetic when he came home yesterday. I almost feel bad for what's coming, but then I remember how boring he is, and I feel better. Some people are just meant to be mediocre. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my own phone. Then I carefully put her phone back exactly where I found it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about 15 years of marriage, 15 years of supporting her dreams and taking care of her family, and this is how she really saw me. But as I lay there in the dark, something shifted inside me. The hurt started turning into something else, something focused and cold. They thought they were dealing with a pushover who'd roll over and let them take everything. They had no idea they just declared war on someone who makes a living finding hidden assets and exposing financial fraud. By morning, I had a plan. I took 3 personal days from work and told Brenda I was helping a colleague with a project. Instead, I spent those days building the case against my soon-to-be ex-wife. First, I gathered all our financial records. Every bank statement, every credit card bill, every receipt. I documented every penny I'd spent supporting her over the years. Her school loans, her mother's medical bills, her brother's legal troubles, even the expensive clothes she'd been buying for her affair. Next, I hired a private investigator. I know that sounds dramatic, but when you're dealing with financial investigations, you need documentation that will hold up in court. I needed proof of the affair and evidence of their plans. The PI was a former police detective named Walter Finch. He was thorough and discreet. Within a week, he had photos of Brad and Brenda together, records of hotel visits, and even recordings of them talking in Brad's car about how they'd split Kevin's money after the divorce. But the real breakthrough came when I started investigating Brad Hawkins himself. See, this is where my professional skills came in handy. I spend my days investigating people's financial backgrounds for regulatory compliance. I know how to find hidden debts, undisclosed liabilities, and financial irregularities. Brad Hawkins looked good on the surface. Nice car, nice clothes, talked a big game about his income. But when I dug deeper, I found something interesting. His credit report was a disaster. He was 3 months behind on his car payments. The Corvette was leased, not owned, and he was about to lose it. He had 4 maxed-out credit cards, a defaulted personal loan, and was being sued by 2 different creditors. His pharmaceutical sales job? He'd been on a performance improvement plan for 6 months and was likely to be fired soon. His 6-figure income was mostly commission-based, and his sales numbers had been declining for 2 years. The fancy restaurants he was taking my wife to? All paid for with credit cards he couldn't afford. But here's the best part. Brad Hawkins was also married. Separated, but not divorced. His wife Patricia had filed for divorce 8 months ago. And guess what she was asking for? Alimony. Substantial alimony, because Brad had convinced her to quit her job to support his career. So my wife was leaving me for a broke, lying, soon-to-be unemployed man who was already going to be paying alimony to another woman. I documented everything. bank records, credit reports, employment records, court filings from his pending divorce. I built a file that would make any forensic accountant proud. Then I made my first strategic move. I called Brad's wife, Patricia. The conversation with Patricia Hawkins was enlightening. She was a nurse who'd given up her career to support Brad's sales ambitions. After 12 years of marriage, she discovered he was a serial cheater and a financial disaster. He's charming, she told me. He can convince anyone that he's successful. But he spends money we don't have to maintain an image. I've been covering his credit card payments for years. I told her about Brenda, and we compared notes. Brad had been telling both women that he was wealthy and successful, while secretly being broke and irresponsible. Patricia was grateful for the information. My lawyer will love this, she said. Brad's been claiming he can't afford alimony because his income is variable. But if he's spending money on another woman while claiming poverty to the court, that's going to be a problem for him. That's when I realized the full scope of my strategy. See, Brenda and Brad thought they were outsmarting one boring, middle-aged man. But what they didn't know was that I'm worth $3.2 million. Stock options from my company, smart investments, and 15 years of careful saving while living below my means. They also didn't know that I'm considered one of the best financial investigators in my field. My company pays me a substantial salary specifically because I can find financial fraud that others miss. And they definitely didn't know that I've been documenting their plan to defraud me in the divorce for weeks. While they were planning to take me for everything, I was building a case that would expose them both as liars and cheaters. Patricia would get the evidence she needed to secure her alimony. I would keep my assets protected, and Brenda would learn that boring doesn't mean stupid. The midpoint of my plan was beautifully simple. I was going to let them think they were winning, right up until the moment I revealed the truth. What they didn't know was that I'd already moved the majority of our liquid assets into accounts they couldn't touch, hired the best divorce attorney in the state, and gathered enough evidence to prove fraud if they tried to hide assets or lie under oath. I spent the next 2 weeks acting completely normal. I even seemed a little more depressed than usual, which made Brenda think her plan was working. She started being extra nice to me, which I now knew was guilt mixed with the anticipation of her new life. Meanwhile, I was making my final preparations. I arranged to have divorce papers prepared and ready to serve. I organized all my evidence into a comprehensive file. I even had my accountant prepare a full financial disclosure that would shock Brenda when she realized what she was actually walking away from. The best part of my strategy was that everything I was doing was completely legal and ethical. I wasn't hiding assets or lying about income. I was simply protecting myself from people who were planning to defraud me. 2 weeks later, Brenda finally made her move. It was a Thursday evening when Brenda decided to drop the bomb. She made a nice dinner, which should have been my first clue that something was up. "Kevin," she said, sitting across from me at our dining room table. "We need to talk." I looked up from my plate and waited. "I haven't been happy for a long time," she began, using what I'm sure she thought was a gentle tone. "I feel like we've grown apart, and I think it's time we considered separating." I nodded slowly. "I see. Is there someone else?" She actually had the nerve to look hurt by the question. "This isn't about anyone else, Kevin. This is about us. About how we want different things in life. Such as, I want more, Kevin. I want to experience life, not just go through the motions. You're content with mediocrity, but I'm not." I took a sip of my water. "So you want a divorce?" "I think it would be best for both of us," she said. "We can keep this amicable. I'm not looking to take you for everything, Kevin. I just want what's fair." That last line almost made me laugh. She'd literally been planning to take me for everything for months. "What do you think would be fair?" I asked. "Well, I supported your career for 15 years. I put my own dreams on hold. I think I deserve half of our assets, plus some support while I get back on my feet." "Half of our assets," I repeated. "It's only fair, Kevin. And it's not like we have that much anyway. The house, your retirement account, whatever's in savings. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. This was my moment. I could have exposed her right then and there. But I wanted to see how far she'd go with this act. "You're right," I said finally. "I'll call a lawyer tomorrow, and we can start the process." The relief on her face was almost insulting. Thank you for being so understanding, she said. I was worried you'd make this difficult. Why would I make it difficult? If you're not happy, you should go find what makes you happy. She actually reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're a good man, Kevin. You deserve someone who appreciates what you have to offer. The next morning, I call my lawyer, Nathan Weber. Nathan is a former federal prosecutor who now specializes in high-asset divorces. He's exactly the kind of attorney you want when someone is trying to defraud you. Kevin, he said after I'd explained the situation, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of attempted fraud I've seen. They've documented their entire plan in text messages. What's our next move? We serve her with papers that include a full financial disclosure. All of it. Every account, every investment, every stock option. When she sees what she's actually walking away from and realizes you've known about her affair the whole time, she's going to panic. And Brad, his wife's attorney, will love this evidence. Between what he owes Patricia and what he's about to lose in legal fees, Brad Hawkins is going to wish he'd never heard her wife's name. That afternoon, I came home to find Brenda packing her clothes. I found a place to stay, she said without looking at me. I think it's better if I move out now, to give us both space. She was moving in with Brad, of course, but I just nodded. I'll have my lawyer send the papers to wherever you're staying, I said. Thanks, she said. Kevin, I hope you know this isn't personal. I just need to do what's right for me. As I watched her pack her designer clothes that I'd paid for, I smiled to myself. She had no idea what was coming. The process server found Brenda at Brad's apartment 3 days later. According to Nathan, she opened the door expecting a package delivery and instead got a manila envelope that would change her life. I was at work when my phone rang. Kevin, Brenda's voice was shaking. What the hell is this? What's what? These divorce papers. It says you're worth over $3 million. That can't be right. Why can't it be right? Because you work in compliance. You drive a Honda. So where did this money come from? Stock options, bonuses, investments. The same places everyone gets money, Brenda. There was a long silence. You've been hiding this from me? I wasn't hiding anything. You never asked about my investments. You always said you didn't want to deal with boring financial stuff. Kevin, we need to talk. This changes everything. Does it? Yesterday, you wanted half of nothing. Today, I'm worth more than you thought. And suddenly you want to talk. That's not. I mean, we're still married, Kevin. This is still half mine. Actually, Brenda, most of it isn't. About 60% of my assets are from stock options and investments I made before we got married or inheritance from my parents. Those are separate property. Another silence. I could practically hear her calculating. We need to discuss this in person, she said finally. We can discuss it through our lawyers. Mine is Nathan Weber. I'm sure your attorney will want to review the financials. I don't have an attorney yet. Well, you should probably get one. Make sure to mention that there's evidence of adultery. Some lawyers won't take cases where there's proven infidelity because it affects the settlement. Evidence of what? I have to go, Brenda. I'm at work. I hung up and went back to my spreadsheets, smiling for the first time in months. By the end of the week, the whole story had come out. Patricia Hawkins' lawyer had subpoenaed Brad's financial records and discovered that he'd been spending money he didn't have to impress my wife. The court was not pleased that he'd been claiming poverty while dating another woman. Word started getting around their social circle. Brenda's book club friends learned that she'd left her millionaire husband for a broke man who was about to lose his car. Nancy Garrett, one of Brenda's closest friends, called me directly. Kevin, I had no idea, she said. Brenda always made it sound like you two were struggling financially. We were never struggling, Nancy. We just lived modestly. She told everyone you were, well, that you weren't ambitious. But Kevin, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been wealthy? I've been doing well for years, Nancy. I just didn't feel the need to advertise it. And she didn't know. She knew I was comfortable. She never asked for details, and I didn't think it mattered. I guess I was wrong. The conversation with Nancy was important because Nancy talks to everyone. By the next. But the best part was still coming. Nathan Weber was everything I'd hoped for in an attorney. When Brenda finally hired a lawyer and demanded mediation, Nathan was ready. The mediation took place in a conference room downtown. Brenda showed up with her attorney, Donald Clark, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics in divorce cases. I arrived with Nathan and a banker's box full of evidence. "Let's get right to it," Clark said. "My client is entitled to half of all marital assets, plus alimony based on the lifestyle she's become accustomed to." Nathan smiled. "Your client is entitled to half of all assets acquired during the marriage, minus separate property. She's also entitled to alimony if she can prove need and that the marriage was dissolved for reasons other than her own misconduct." "What misconduct?" Clark demanded. Nathan opened the box and pulled out a folder. "Adultery, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted asset hiding. Take your pick." He spread out printed copies of text messages, photographs, financial records, and recorded conversations. "Your client has been planning to defraud my client for months," Nathan continued. "She's been working with her lover to identify assets to claim in the divorce, while simultaneously planning to hide her own affair." Clark's face went white as he reviewed the evidence. "Furthermore," Nathan continued, "the man your client left her husband for is currently being sued for failure to pay alimony to his own wife. He's 3 months behind on his car payments and facing bankruptcy. His employment is in jeopardy, and his total debt exceeds $60,000. This doesn't change the fact that she's entitled to marital assets," Clark said weakly. "Actually, it does," Nathan replied. "In this state, proven adultery affects both asset division and alimony eligibility. More importantly, conspiracy to commit fraud can result in criminal charges." Brenda spoke for the first time. "Kevin, please. We can work this out." I looked at her across the table. "You called me mediocre, Brenda. You said I was worth nothing. You planned to take everything from me while you started a new life with someone else." "I never said you were worth nothing." Nathan slid a transcript across the table. "You said, and I quote, 'What's half of nothing when discussing the divorce settlement with your sister?' I was upset. You were planning fraud," I said calmly. "For months." The mediation ended with Brenda accepting exactly what she was legally entitled to under state law, accounting for her adultery. Instead of half of everything, she got about 15% of her marital assets, no alimony, and had to pay her own legal fees. But the financial consequences were just the beginning. 3 weeks later, Brad Hawkins lost his job. His employer had learned about his financial troubles during Patricia's divorce proceedings, and a sales representative who can't manage his own money isn't someone they wanted representing their company. Without income, Brad defaulted on his car lease. The Corvette was repossessed on a Tuesday morning, right in front of the apartment complex where he and Brenda were living. Patricia got her alimony award, which meant that even if Brad found another job, most of his income would go to his ex-wife. Brenda had left a millionaire for a man who was now unemployed, carless, and owed more money than he'd make in 2 years. But I wasn't done yet. The final confrontation happened by accident. I was having lunch at a restaurant downtown when Brenda walked in. She was alone, and she looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past 2 months. She saw me and walked over to my table. "Kevin, can I sit down?" I gestured to the empty chair. "You look good," she said. "Happy. I'm happy. I heard about your promotion. My company had promoted me to Regional Compliance Director the week before, with a substantial raise and even more stock options. It's been a good year," I said. "Kevin, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I waited. I was stupid and selfish, and I threw away the best thing in my life for someone who lied to me about everything. I'm sorry that happened to you." Brad's living with his cousin now. He owes Patricia $1,200 a month in alimony, and he's working at a call center making $12 an hour. That must be difficult. "Kevin, I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance we could try again?" I realize now how good I had it. How good you were to me. I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 15 years. I thought about all the times I'd supported her dreams, paid her bills, taken care of her family. I thought about how she'd repaid that by planning to steal from me while she started a new life with another man. "Brenda, do you remember what you said about me being mediocre?" She looked down. I was angry. "I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did. And you know what? You were right about one thing. I am ordinary in a lot of ways. I drive a regular car, live in a regular house, wear regular clothes." She looked hopeful. "But here's what you never understood. I continued. Being ordinary doesn't mean being worthless. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. And being humble about money doesn't mean not having any. Kevin, you thought Brad was better than me because he drove a flashy car and talked about money. But flash isn't substance, Brenda. Never was. I know that now. Do you? Or do you just know that I have more money than you thought? She didn't answer. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, standing up. But it won't be with me. As I walked away, I heard her start to cry. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt sorry for her. Not sorry enough to take her back, but sorry that she'd spent 15 years married to someone she never bothered to really know. That was 8 months ago. The divorce was finalized, Brenda moved back in with her sister, and I got on with my life. I still live in the same house and drive the same Honda. I still dress modestly and avoid flashy displays of wealth. But now I do it by choice, not because I'm hiding anything. I've started dating someone new. Her name is Rebecca, and she's a teacher. She drives a 12-year-old Toyota and thinks Olive Garden is perfectly fine for dinner. When I told her about my financial situation, she said, "That's nice," and then asked if I wanted to split the appetizer. I've also started being more generous with my money. I set up a scholarship fund at the local community college for adults returning to school. I've donated to several charities that help women leaving abusive relationships. And I bought myself one thing that's definitely not modest, a beautiful sailboat that I keep at the marina. Rebecca and I spend weekends on the water, and I've never been happier. As for Brenda and Brad, last I heard they're still together, living in a one-bedroom apartment and struggling to make ends meet. Brad eventually found another sales job, but between Patricia's alimony and their own expenses, they're barely scraping by. Brenda tried to contact me a few more times, but I've moved on completely. I learned something important from this whole experience. The people who really matter will appreciate you for who you are, not what you have. And the people who only care about what you have aren't worth having in your life. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's just living well, while the people who wronged you face the natural consequences of their own bad choices. I'm 53 now, financially secure, and in love with someone who sees my worth beyond my bank account. Brenda is 45, working part-time retail, and learning that real life isn't as exciting as she thought it would be. I don't wish her harm, but I don't wish her well either. I just don't think about her at all anymore. And that, I think, is the best kind of revenge there is. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what you would have done in Kevin's situation. Have you ever had someone underestimate you? Share your story below.
If this story got you thinking, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that hit deep, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this one, share it with them. Thanks for watching.